John Gilroy here. Everyone is getting dazzled by AI. Today, let's look at responsible AI. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Melisa Bardhi, Data Science Capability Lead at a company called Excella, Excella. I got tons of questions about responsible AI, but I want to maybe set the stage here for some listeners maybe just getting into this and don't know how to put this in perspective. So I'll get up my history book here. So back in 1956, John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence. It's kind of set in the backwaters here for decades and decades until cheap storage, fast internet, all of a sudden we have a perfect storm for using it. This emergent dynamic field is changing so fast that we may be getting we're getting ahead of our skis. We're going to fall down because it's changing so fast. I wanted to focus on this idea of responsibility. And before we jump in, Melisa, we're going to talk about generative AI. And what the heck is generative AI anyway?
So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that focuses on creating new content rather than analyzing existing data to make inferences. And these models to produce Gen AI are trained on massive data sets designed to understand the underlying distribution of training data and ultimately use that to produce new content. And some of the content that they generate can range from text to documents, code, images, visualizations, audio, and video. And so the potential of these tools is massive in terms of what they can create. And the way that it differs from traditional AI is in that generative keyword, because it can generate new content, which is what makes it incredibly powerful.
Now, when you hear about Disneyland, everything is perfect, everything is clean, there's no problems, everything's great, people love it. And this could be the presentation people get about generative AI. But I think what's happened is some people may have seen some bias in some of the data sets. They might have seen some issues with security. And there could be these things called hallucinations. So not as all Disneyland with this. There's some issues here, aren't there?
That is right on. Exactly. And so given the range of these capabilities, we know that Gen AI has the immense potential to revolutionize the federal industry. But because it's a fairly new technology, its development needs to be approached responsibly throughout, from inception to deployment. And the reason why that's so important is because of some of the key points that you just addressed, one of which is around bias and fairness. So as I mentioned, these models are trained from massive data sets. And as a result of that, sometimes they can reflect existing societal biases. And if they're not addressed early on at the input source, as the models are trained, these biases can be amplified at the output that they produce. They're often also used to learn from data sets that are scraped from the web, which can sometimes contain personal information. And so another component of that is ensuring data security early on to prevent the misuse of personal information. And finally, to your earlier point around hallucinations and potentially even malicious use, because their capabilities are continuously improving, they can also be used to create very convincing fake content. You may have heard of deepfakes as an example of that, or to spread disinformation. And so it's incredibly important to ensure that these tools are used responsibly and that they're also regulated to avoid downstream impacts on users and society. And the final thing, to your point on hallucinations, there's also the component of explainability and accountability, because the underlying technology that produces this content can often operate as a black box, which means that because of their complexity, they're very difficult to understand how a single input can result in a specific output and how they make decisions. And so transparency and explainability, especially in the federal sector, is incredibly important to make sure that we build trust in these tools. And that's why a key component of our talk today is not just Gen AI, but using it responsibly.
My avocation is reading history. Last night I was reading a book by a guy named Payson about the founding of the frontier in America.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line is pioneers get the arrows.
That's right.
And I don't know if people realize this, but there's a lot of arrows in bodies at Excella because they're always on the leading edge. I've known about Excella for 20 years, and you guys kind of closed, I don't know, maybe Jeff Gallimore and you closed your eyes and just jumped in, but you've been experimenting and making mistakes and saying, oh, don't touch the stove, it's too hot. So you've really figured out a lot of these guidelines. I think you have some kind of a policy there. Is that right?
Exactly. Right on, John. So at Excella, we've been early adopters of generative AI tools, and we've prioritized responsible application for our clients throughout. To your point, we've developed a comprehensive Gen AI use policy to ensure that the systems that we build are fair, secure, transparent, and accountable. And we can link that policy at the bottom of this podcast for interested folks.
Yeah, and we're going to name 2 or 3 different websites. I'll put them all in the show notes here so you can link to them after the interview. Everyone hears about, deep fakes and this and writing things, and high school kids don't have to write anymore. Yeah. So from the perspective of someone working in a federal agency, so what would be sitting having coffee with someone from DOI, from Interiors? Well, just what are the steps that you'd recommend for getting started with this Gen AI stuff responsibly?
Yeah, that's a great one. So to get started, it's really important to look at the big picture and define your objectives with this technology, because your goals might include empowering employees to safely leverage these tools to enhance productivity or to develop your own customized Gen AI solution. The Gen AI tools out there are very diverse and adaptable, meaning that they're capable of meeting users at their current skill level, whether that involves using an off-the-shelf solution like ChatGPT or Google AI Studio, all the way to building and fine-tuning your own custom models for specific purposes. But given the novelty of this technology, the most important step and takeaway to get started is to engage in hands-on learning in a safe environment. At Excella, Gen AI is a horizontal and cross-functional initiative, which means that we leverage it safely throughout the organization, both internally to boost productivity, as well as externally in the solutions that we build for clients. And we've developed the Expedition Gen AI Adoption Framework to ensure the strategic alignment and adoption of Gen AI with our clients. And that framework outlines some of the steps for getting started, which includes identifying clear and measurable objectives for your Gen AI project to ensure that your goals directly support your federal agency's mission, first and foremost. Then we proceed to assess existing resources and capabilities, for example, our data sources, our technical infrastructure, personnel expertise, and develop a plan to address any potential gaps. We then recommend starting with pilot projects or proof of concepts that demonstrate a clear value, that are low risk, and adhere to a responsible AI framework. And finally, we work on identifying models that are suitable for a specific task, be it pre-trained models or customized ones that get tailored to meet an agency's needs. And always focus on implementing them end-to-end in a controlled environment, evaluate them thoroughly, and be flexible to make any adjustments necessary before deploying them to production. So we've used this framework in partnership with our clients across the federal, civilian, security, and private markets, and we're seeing results. We've been actively working to implement a variety of solutions, some of which leverage RAG architectures to generate relevant content like job descriptions or summaries of documents. Others leverage large language models for chatbots or programming tools like Codex or Copilot to enhance productivity. And this framework enables us ultimately to maintain alignment, prototype rapidly, and deploy well-vetted, responsible solutions for our clients.
I could probably put together a little notebook of terms that I've used just today in preparing for this interview. You just used one of them, RAG, retrieval augmented generation. I mean, there's so many terms. I can't, maybe the Gilroy dictionary of new terms for AI is so many of them. One term that people are throwing about is this term Dora. And it sounds like a cartoon, back to Disney, I guess, sounds like a cartoon character. So what's a cartoon character got to do with this topic?
Well, let's address RAG first really quickly, just to make sure that there's clarity. So RAG, as you mentioned, stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And very high level, it's an AI architecture designed to enhance the capabilities of AI models by incorporating what are called information retrieval mechanisms. And that's why you start off with the retrieval component of retrieving information that's learned, augmenting it to customize it to a specific relevant answer, and then generating that answer. So in summary, that architecture has helped to produce relevant content for users based on their needs. To your earlier question on Dora specifically, at Excella, we've been actively applying Dora, and Dora stands for the DevOps Research and Assessment Initiative, which Google created. And they provide a variety of principles to assess performance at technology companies. And we apply Dora across all of our clients. And one of the key components that we value offered by Dora is frequent deployments, which is something that allows us to be agile and deliver GenAI solutions quickly to adapt them as needed in lockstep with our client requirements.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm taking notes here because there's so much to talk about. When I said the term, I glossed over it, but when you said the term generative, then I said, wait a minute, talk about generative AI right here. It's like, and so AI presents a problem, and then you counter it with an AI solution. So it sounds like what we're happening here is that it's using a technology to improve the technology itself. Is that what RAG does?
That's right. It's an architecture to improve the technology itself. That is a good interpretation of it. Because ultimately, we want to produce content that is relevant, and that architecture helps refine the answers that are output for the user.
Boy, 10 people, 10 definitions of generative AI and applications. And I was at an event and I listened to some person up on stage there, and they said that generative AI can give you knowledge that's trapped in data. Oh, I like those 4 words. Nice little 4 words there, because there could be some needle in the haystack that would be the answer to a question. And if you put a human being with an Excel spreadsheet or a clipboard, well, see you in a year. And so what we're trying to do here is get answers efficiently, and using this technology to efficiently get answers with the guidelines that I think Excella is saying, well, yes, but no cowboys here. Talk about pioneers and Indians and cowboys. There's work within the frameworks here, and this can be a lot safer than going outside the frameworks and really getting in serious trouble. And I can see serious trouble out there in many areas.
That's absolutely right. It's incredibly important to learn about and apply these tools safely within limitations and in controlled environments, because, as we've said, there are risks that come with this, and it's important to balance those risks with their potential benefits.
You talked about some models for AI. Washington Post, ChatGPT. So is that a model, a type of and there's several different models that people could consider in using. Is that how we structure this?
Absolutely. Yeah. ChatGPT is one of the most well-known generative AI tools out there. And it's one of the ones that's fairly accessible to most users because it just requires an account to go in, log on, and it's a service where you can ask any question or ask it to do something like summarize information, and it will retrieve and provide you a relatively high quality answer depending on the question at hand. And it was introduced in the market over 1.5 years ago, and that is when it started to get the most attention. And since then, that's where you see a lot of this hype around Gen AI having proliferated. But there are a lot of tools out there, some of which can be more performant than ChatGPT, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And in the case of Excella, we focus a lot on leveraging models available through cloud platforms like Azure Machine Learning, AWS SageMaker, or the GCP, the Google Cloud Platform AI tool. And that allows us to have on-demand access to pre-trained models and APIs through AI as a service, which has the benefits of eliminating the need for agencies to invest in infrastructure and deployment. A lot of these services provided through these cloud providers like Azure, AWS, and GCP also have some very solid documentation to allow users to follow detailed guides when implementing these models. And the alternative to that path is ChatGPT and some other tools like what you mentioned. Like, for example, Bard, you have Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, GitHub Copilot, among others, are some key well-known models out there used to generate content or images or even code.
Yeah, yeah. True confessions. Went online and looked up the OMB memo from March 28th about AI. I looked up the DHS promoting AI safety and security. And tell you the truth, I'm not saying these are the most boring documents I've ever read in my life, but they put me right to sleep. I started tooling around, and there are smarter people than me have gotten together and maybe said, okay, let's make all these birds fly in formation. And I think you got together a couple of colleagues and put together something that is kind of like a crowdsourced understanding of AI for the federal government. Is that what that document for ACT you put together?
That's right. In response to the executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI, several groups at ACT, including the innovation team, was focused on producing content in response to some of the requirements in that executive order, one of which was to produce AI, not just Gen AI, but AI more broadly, that is explainable, which means tools that are not black boxes, but ones where the relationship between the input data sources and the output inferences or content can be explained. And the core reason why that's so important is because, as you know, in the federal government, agencies often are working with very sensitive, secured, or classified data sources. And we want to ensure the safety of the United States, including its citizens, and all of their information globally. And so approaching this thoughtfully is an incredibly important goal for all agencies, including Excella.
Almost, I think this is what we're getting. I mean, people can learn about ChatGPT and Bard, and they can be, adventurers and do whatever they want. But in the environment people who are listening to this podcast are living in, they have to be more careful. And so I think the baby step in getting a stronger workforce is, I'd start off with your article on ACT because it's pretty much vendor neutral. It's like Excel is the greatest. No, it doesn't say that. It says, here's some concepts. Here's how maybe you can deploy these concepts. And the whole idea is having some kind of a neutral third party that can maybe interpret some of these magnificent documents from the federal government. Maybe a little wordy, it could be that. So that's real nice. So if we're trying to learn, and no, very few people have the training you have, but let's say we're trying to get our feet wet in this and try to understand more and more, start reading some articles. Are there, guidelines for maybe partnering with organizations, or what would you recommend to someone to maybe improve the people on their team to get up to speed with AI?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would start off with saying that at Excella, responsible use is baked into our solutions from the beginning. And one point that emphasizes that is our Gen A use policy, which we've created, that really provides guidelines on how we produce solutions for our clients. And some of that includes taking into consideration not just the AI executive order on safety, but all federal laws and regulations on AI, including the NIST AI risk management framework. And so I'm mentioning this to say that starting out, it's incredibly important to read this documentation to get a grounding on what the expectations are from top down on AI safety. That gives you a broad framework for handling AI responsibly. Now, in terms of getting started directly with AI, I would recommend to support internal training and development at your agency or organization, because with the increasing demand of these solutions, there's a wealth of knowledge and opportunities available at our fingertips to enable learning, workshops, certifications, conferences, online courses.
You didn't say it. I'll say it. Excella's got a blog. We got some pretty good articles there. And I'll put that in the show notes too. But they do, And when I went to your company website, I was looking at this and that. There's a job title called AI engineer. This is a new one, huh? I mean, it happened 2-3 years ago. All of a sudden, you can put that on your resume, I guess, or look for someone with that background. AI engineer. So analytical ability, some math competency, maybe some knowledge of process and process automation. It's a fusion of skills. It's not just one skill, is it? It's not just a data scientist. It's kind of like a fusion of skills.
That's absolutely right. And at Excella, we've established the AI engineering role, and that's become a cornerstone of our approach to delivering cutting-edge Gen AI solutions. And this role is unique because it blends expertise in software engineering, model development, and cloud services. And having those three skill sets in combination, we found creates synergies for very quick prototyping of products and solutions, iterative development up to deployment. And our success with AI engineers has demonstrated the critical value of the skill set. And we would encourage agencies and organizations out there to really foster the same skills within their teams, because they will continue to be in high demand and remain essential for the success in the future of AI.
What's interesting is you talked about Google Dora, and you talked about Azure. I mean, it's you're hitting all the mountains here. I mean, you're not just narrowly focused in one solution. Hey, one size fits all. I want to make it easy and fun and turn the light and it has all the answers, but boy, you got to be so careful with providing the framework. And I guess I don't know, have you ever gone bowling and they put up those little bumper guards? It's like, we'll take Jeff Gallimore bowling, but we'll put up the bumper guards for old Jeff so he doesn't get too many gutter balls. And that's, I think, what the frameworks that you're talking about is that, yes, you can use it, little Jeff, but we don't want you to get to zero score. We want you to maybe, and that's, I'm trying to think of the guidelines for this.
That's exactly right. And a big part of this has also for us been ensuring that we use FedRAMP tools and services that often meet the highest security standards for our clients. In fact, we go above and beyond, and we regularly conduct tool evaluations in-house to ensure that the cloud service provider or the tool that we ultimately use is customized for any particular solution and tailored to it. And that's not just in the beginning in selecting it, but also ensuring that we are regularly evaluating it throughout for things like accuracy, fairness, robustness, and potential drift when it's deployed in a production environment. And finally, another key facet of that framework of safety for us is always ensuring that our solutions incorporate humans in the loop to support decision-making rather than making automatic decisions, because ultimately we want AI to empower people to make better decisions rather than replace those decision makers.
And that's the whole idea, make better decisions in a responsible manner. Sounds like it's an adult, mature thing. I was listening to a podcast with some young people, and guys like in his 20s, and he talked about being platform agnostic, and he thought that was a brand new concept. We talked about being platform agnostic 30 years ago, but I like the idea that Excella is platform agnostic in that 9/16 doesn't work. Let's try metric. Okay, metric 9, no, that doesn't work either. Let's try to get a ball peen hammer, and then the ball peen hammer may work for an agency and use that specific tool with a certain modification. Wait, well, that's interesting. I'm just thinking that I look at my calendar 6 months from now, you shake up the jar and have a whole different conversation. It's like, well, this would happen. There's a variation on this, and there's Dora 2. And so it's just so interesting being on the leading edge here of there's all these brand new technologies. So unfortunately, Ms. we're running out of time here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Melisa Bardhi, Data Science Capability Lead at Excella. Thanks, Melisa.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.